I'm Dr. Janice Morrow with American Mood Swings, and today I'm here with Dr. Michael Ingram. He's a Los Angeles-based psychiatrist who specializes in obsessive compulsive disorders and attention deficit disorders. Let's kind of dive into your expertise is in obsessive compulsive disorders.
A lot of people have a misconception about what it is. The whole idea that being a neat freak is sort of what OCD is really just not true.
Yeah, we all think of Monk,
right.
The TV show Monk. He was a great character, but yeah.
It's an anxiety disorder. It's a worrying type disorder, and it's characterized by both obsessions, which are, intrusive, disturbing thoughts that you have that then lead to anxiety and an urge to do some sort of repetitive act. And so the repetitive act would be the compulsion. So obsessive compulsive disorder is, you can either have obsessions or compulsions. Most people have both.
What are some, could you give a few examples? Because the ones everybody's, like I watched a lot of Monk over Christmas. I was visiting a friend and we were watching.
So when you see the hand washing, that's really the compulsive behavior, right? And that's one of many different types of compulsive behaviors that people can have. Checking, locks on the door, checking the stove many times before you leave, counting. These are all different compulsive acts people have. But what people don't understand is that, or don't realize, is that there are these obsessions that you have. And obsessions are the thoughts that you have that are disturbing and really intrusive. They're unwanted. They don't make any sense to you, and you're wondering why you're thinking about them. As a result, you get so much anxiety that you start to look for ways to ease that anxiety, and that's what the compulsive acts are. They're a way to kind of relieve that distress that you're feeling from those intrusive thoughts. But unfortunately, as you do the compulsive act, it doesn't get to the level of reassurance that you want, or that's adequate or satisfactory, and so you just continue to do it over and over and over again. And it's just a really vicious cycle.
Almost like a binge eater, like
yes.
you're thinking about food and you go get ice cream.
And binge eating disorder and the eating disorders in general would be, are considered under the umbrella of obsessive compulsive and related disorders. So when we think of obsessive compulsive disorder, we're really talking about an umbrella term that encompasses many different types of disorders. Okay, so there's traditional obsessive compulsive disorder, but then there's also hoarding disorder. Which is people kind of hoarding. You've seen that on TV.
All right. Well, let's talk about how you would go about diagnosing it, and then perhaps, if we, time permits, maybe just an overview of like how somebody suffering from this would be treated.
Yeah. So obsessive compulsive disorder is it's diagnosed by a clinician. It's a clinical diagnosis, so there's no test, blood test or imaging study that's going to diagnose it. It's really about the psychiatric interview and sitting with a clinician that understands obsessive compulsive disorder and then can make the diagnosis.
Do you find that most people are forthright? Because if it might be things that you don't see, are they hiding it, or are they do they come to you and they're open, like, this is what I do. I wash my hands 1,000 times a day.
You only get so much from the patient themselves in that an hour or hour and a half that you get to spend with them. But as you develop the relationship with them and as you see them over time, their symptoms and their behaviors start to reveal themselves. And so that's why I think it's important that that it's not, you don't just sit there for an hour and a half and then you make a diagnosis. It's like, even though insurance companies want you to do that and people are looking for that, it's just really not the way that it works. You have to sort of get to know the person over time in many visits in order to really make an accurate diagnosis.
Well, there's a comedian, I've seen him on TV, he's been very open, Howie Mandel, about his OCD and how when he first went public with it. So where I'm going with it is like, kind of let's talk about the treatments, options, and what's the prognosis? Because I've seen him recently, and it sounds like he still suffers from it quite a bit, and it's very debilitating for him. And
one of the unfortunate parts of obsessive compulsive disorder is that our treatments aren't as effective as we want them to be. We know that a combination of medicine and therapy together are better than either individually. And the type of therapy that we use for obsessive compulsive disorder is a therapy called exposure response prevention.
Like, give us an example.
So if you have a sort of an obsession about contamination, for example, maybe you think that if I don't wash my hands, that I'll have germs on my hands and it'll hurt people or hurt myself. Let's say that's an obsession. And so then what you do is you end up washing your hands many times during the day because you feel like, oh, I don't know if they're clean enough. So what we would do is we would expose that individual by making their hands dirty and prevent them from washing their hands.
Oh.
Now that's very distressing, right? And it's a really distressing therapy. But over time, they realize, oh, it's okay. I don't have to wash my hands. It's not dangerous to not wash my hands. It's not hygienic, but it's not going to kill me, right? It's not a huge threat to me. So we're trying to relieve that anxiety or that threat that's there that causes people to want to do the compulsive act, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And because it's so distressing to do that, medication is usually provided or administered or prescribed as a way to ease some of that discomfort when they're going through that process. Mm.
All right, well, we have just a few moments left. So I wanted to touch on your specialty of, because I had never heard the phrase consultation liaison therapy, so maybe you could just kind of explain how that works and the difference and
Yeah, so consultation liaison psychiatry is a subspecialty of psychiatry that looks to bridge the gap between physical and mental health. So traditionally, we think of mental health and physical health as being two separate things. And this particular specialty is basically trying to bridge that gap and say, you know what, there is no difference between mental and physical health. They're very much the same. So this particular specialty looks at the overlap between medical problems that people have and psychiatric problems people have, and how they can influence each other or make each other worse in that way, if that makes sense.
It does. One thing that I'm almost concerned about as a doctor myself, and it's a beautiful thing, but at the same time I have some reservations. So there's definitely a move to people that are super overweight. Like loving ourselves. We should love ourselves the way we are, and we want confidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, these are all, when we think of, the biggest sort of behavioral problems that people have in terms of overeating or smoking cigarettes, these are all behaviors, right? And I think that our physical health and our well-being, our physical well-being, has a lot to do with how we think and how we feel about ourselves. And so I think looking at that relationship between the two and how they influence each other is very important, because we do know that people who have a lot of medical problems, who also have psychiatric issues, they cost the healthcare system a lot more money than people who don't, and they also have poor outcomes. And so it tells us that there is a relationship there, and they are influencing each other, and we should have these conversations and talk about how they influence each other.
Well, we hope to have you back and delve into that a little more in depth. And thank you again for joining us here with American Mood Swings. It's been really informative and helpful. So
thanks for having me.
We'll have you back. All right, thanks a lot. Thank you so much for joining us with American Mood Swings, and we hope that you'll find it helpful and informative for your life and your loved ones. We want to destigmatize mental health and make it where we talk about it like other illnesses. The goal of the show is really to try to take away some of that shame. There shouldn't be shame. So much of this is out of our control, and there's a lot of help out there. So thank you again, and hope you'll tune in for our next episode.